25th, 2019 at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Could I have disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none, let's take a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And the first decision up right now is approval of minutes. There's 4 sets of them. Approved by Councillor Freeman, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Vasic. Any questions? All those in favor? On a roll. Reports of committees. We have 4 of them there from previous committee meetings. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All those in favor? That's all of us. Delegations. First up, Waterloo Federation of Agriculture, Census of Agriculture and Real Dirt on Agriculture. Welcome, Jeff Stager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good to see you again. I'm pretty well the same story that I presented at the Regional Council, so hopefully you won't be...
It was a good story. Okay. So let's hear it again.
Well, I'm here on behalf of the Federation of Agriculture. Today with me is Dennis Hahn, and on behalf of the Federation of Agriculture, I'd like to extend our congratulations to you on this election to council, and that you enjoy your successes and manage your challenges. And today we just want to bring you a view of agriculture in Waterloo region from the 20,000 foot level. We have a great document that we'd like to thank the Region of Waterloo for. It's this one here. It should be on your screens. It's called the Census of Agriculture. We're going to go through this nice and quickly, and there'll be stuff on there I think you'll be surprised just to hear. First page talks about the number of farms in the Waterloo region, and we have 1,374 farms in the Waterloo region. And you'll see a subdivision of that is Kitchener-Waterloo. You're joined together with Kitchener-Waterloo for the number of farms that you have. That's a slight drop. The good news is we are not dropping as fast as other parts in the province or in Canada. If you go over the next page, you'll see a graph that describes the size of farms in the Waterloo region. We're nicely clustered in the 70 to 129 acre range. As our history here in Southern Ontario, especially for Canada, it's about 800 acres. Obviously, the average includes those very, very large farms in the west. Little sidebar on the top of that graph, it'll show you the average age of farm operators, 49.5 in the region of Waterloo, 55 in Ontario. That's actually a good thing because it's thought that as your age of members is decreasing, that is getting younger, that shows there's a vibrancy and energy to your industry. And so we're glad to see that we sit well there. We have arguably a small group of people who are moving up into agriculture, making that a career. So what's the nature of the agriculture in our Waterloo region? Look on table 2 on page 3. Cattle ranching and farming. That's our bread and butter capability here in the Waterloo region. We don't do fruits and vegetables very well. We don't really have the climate for that, so we go with what we do well, and that's cattle and cattle ranching and farming. Last page is some of the numbers for our industry. You'll see Waterloo region last year was gross farm receipts were $563 million, and it cost $483 million to do that. Agriculture is a big part of what happens in the Waterloo region, and so we'd like to bring this attention to you because the City of Waterloo is a member of our Waterloo region, and it's all of us together working the same facts and figures to help guide good policy, good decisions. And it's been good so far. On behalf of the Federation, I'd like to say that we've enjoyed a long time good association, particularly with regional planning, and we're just delighted that has happened. We do have a short list of our concerns for this next 4 years. Under the rubric Producing Prosperity, we're concerned in the country about infrastructure, and that would be high-speed internet, natural gas to all. Sure like to see an all-day train to the big city of Toronto, and Highway 7. We like to see that Highway 7 wasn't done or being worked on, so we encourage you what you can do from that part on your end. In the country, we are at risk of having our schools, hospitals, and libraries closed. A little bit unique in the Waterloo region. We have a very large municipality, 500,000 people, and so we don't suffer the same consequences that other small municipalities in Ontario do, other rural municipalities. We're having a hard time finding labor. There's probably 2 job openings for every college graduate right now, and this is not just the shoveling and raking stuff in farming, but we need people who know how to operate an AI database to apply all that data and get an intelligent answer about what's the right time to plant. There's this huge databases of information. We need people who know how to operate drones and those kind of high-tech things. And so we just encourage you that if you have a young person who doesn't know what they want to do, take them to some of these farm trade shows, and they'll see stuff there you never would imagine that would be associated with farming, but it's high-tech like a lot of industries are now. So we're looking for people. We're, in general, always looking for investment and job growth opportunities in the country. We're really lucky in the Waterloo region, so we have this nice little growing part of our agriculture called, I'm just going to call it, community shared agriculture, boutique type agricultures where you want to buy a specialty product. And in fact, if you want to find just maple syrup, that's an easy one, but we have a guy who just produces Guernsey Gold milk, his own brand and so on. So we're very lucky because we're close to a big city like the big region like the region of Waterloo. That's an opportunity. You can in fact make a living as a person doing that if you can find that niche and develop that. We like good planning, and the Waterloo region, as I mentioned before, we really enjoy working with the region. We have a hard countryside boundary. That's really crucial. We have a well thought out plan for development. We're not against greenfield development, but we know that in the best interest of everybody, as much as you can intensify and brownfield development, that's a really good role, and we encourage that sort of thing to continue. And the last thing I want to bring up in this thing is that we're very proud of our ability to provide a sustainable food production system, and there's no end to that kind of discussion. And before I entertain questions, I just want to finish off with this document here. And this one is, if you know nothing about farming, you read this, we'd be pretty confident you would be able to speak well about agriculture. Now I know, after a day of meetings and you've got lots of material to read through your notes and so on, you may want to do some recreational reading. This is a perfect opportunity. Excuse me. So with that, I'll conclude and thank you for your attention. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be delighted to try to answer those.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Questions for the delegate at this time? And if not, what we have is, I think, this really could have been an input session into our strategic plan with all the different advocacy you had there for the advocating for the urban-rural fabric of our community, high-speed internet, Highway 7, GO Train. Next time we go to Queen's Park, you can come along with us because you seem to have all the same concerns that we do in the urban environment, so that works out well. That
would be a good way to spend some time, I think.
Maybe not that far, but yeah, it would be a way to spend time for sure. Anyway, wonderful. Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. And next up is the Aging Well Waterloo Guide, presented by Jenny Flagler-George with moral support from Dr. John Lewis, which I see in the audience. Welcome, Jenny.
Thanks very much. I'm here on behalf of the Age Friendly Committee with Dr. John Lewis, who will be presenting a piece with me. He's also a professor at the University of Waterloo and a fellow committee member. An age-friendly city supports participation in the community and respects everyone regardless of their age. It's a place that makes it easy for older adults to stay connected to the people and places that are important to them. It helps people stay healthy and active even at the oldest ages and provides appropriate support to those who can no longer care for themselves. At the Age Friendly Waterloo Committee, we believe that age friendliness is for all residents of Waterloo, from those with a baby carriage to those who use mobility devices up to those who are 100 years and beyond. As a result of the committee's efforts, Waterloo has maintained official designation under the World Health Organization's age-friendly city status. A World Health Organization designated age-friendly city is recognized for policies, services, settings, and structures that support people in aging actively. Each year, the committee works with the mayor to host the Mayor's Age-Friendly Waterloo Forum. And this forum is very important to us as it helps to identify areas of opportunity for the City of Waterloo based on direct input from the community members. Over the past 2 years, Waterloo residents have identified the need to support respect and social inclusion, recognizing that not all older adults are the same and not all older adults have the same experiences or needs. As a committee, we've focused on intercultural and intergenerational learning as a way of fostering greater inclusion for residents in Waterloo. John Lewis here with me is going to be discussing a few of our specific projects that have really tied into this focus on inclusivity.
So good afternoon. About a couple of years ago, we had decided that we would kind of take the bull by the horns and apply for a little bit of funding to help support some of the work that we've been undertaking. So one thing that we did was we applied to the federal government's New Horizons program to support the beginning of what we call the Bridges Project. And the theme of the Bridges Project was to leverage two of the assets that we think the city of Waterloo really possesses in abundance. And that is a growing diversity. So we have a number of new immigrants and new Canadians coming into to our city who bring a variety of knowledge and skill sets to our other residents. And we felt that the one message that we could really take advantage of from assessments of the City of Waterloo's age-friendly initiatives from the last several years was to kind of change the narrative about what older adults and who they are. And so instead of calling them older adults or seniors, we would sort of re-empower them as elders. And so many of these new Canadians are coming into our community through Bridges and through South Asian cooking classes, African drumming classes, a Métis art session. These elders are now empowering our young adults to learn and to experience new cultural knowledge that comes from various parts of the world. So that program has been enormously successful, and we've received literally waiting lists as well as numerous requests via Facebook as to whether or not we're going to be sustaining this over the near future. So part of what I've done is the New Horizons program from the federal government had a call that just came out in January, and I've decided in collaboration with colleagues at Queen's University to apply for $1.5 million to keep the program going and also to grow it province-wide. About a year ago, we also conducted an assessment of the City of Waterloo's age-friendly initiatives. And there was one really clear message from our residents was that there's a number of things that the City of Waterloo is doing very well. There's a number of things that the City of Waterloo could be doing. But the one clear message that was coming forward was we could be doing a better job of communicating the assets that the city provides to our older residents. So we, again, took the bull by the horns and did that. So we pulled together what we refer to as the Aging Well Directory. And so this is a comprehensive guide of programs, services, and clubs that are available to older residents of the city. And so what we've called it and branded it as is just a one-stop shop for our residents to essentially go to the source of information and hopefully, connect themselves either as volunteers or as recipients of programs offered by the city. So we've offered this in print form, and we've also got this digitally because, we've got some tech-savvy older residents in our community. Let's face it. So some of the things that we're going to be doing is we're obviously going to be pushing forward and continuing to grab the bull by the horns over the next few years. And we're going to be, with the assistance of Director Jim Bowman's staff, putting in for a Heritage Canada grant, which would be worth approximately $200,000 to sort of piggyback onto the Bridges program and hopefully expand it. So that's what we've been up to. Thank you very much.
Just to finish it off, as we look forward to the future, we're focused on strategic planning. So at our most recent meeting, which was actually last Friday, we had the folks who are working on the city's strategic planning visit our committee and give us the opportunity to provide input on prioritizing strategies or strategic priorities. And we also intend to align our own committee strategic planning to the city's strategic plan to make sure they're really well aligned and working in lockstep. At the Age Friendly Waterloo Committee, we believe that age friendliness is for all residents of Waterloo, and we look forward to continuing to build on our work by working on Age Friendly Waterloo for residents now and also 10, 20, and 30 years into the future.
Thank you, Jen. Do you happen to remember what the stats we heard on Friday were of the South Asian cooking class? Like how many registrants they got within a certain period of time when it came out?
Yeah, so it's capped at, I believe, 39 people, and there was around double that, I believe around 74 who had tried to register. Yeah. So quite a few folks on the waiting list, which really shows that there's a good amount of uptake for it.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. Questions from Council. Councillor Veith first.
Jim has just told me that he can also forward the report from that for the evaluation so that folks can have a chance to read that as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for coming. This is great. I belong to a couple of organizations mentioned in here. Anyway, I just wondered, where can we get, and how many did you have printed?
Funny you should ask.
Well, we had 30,000 printed, and the uptake has been considerable. We're already at the point where we need to print more. So they've been distributed through all City of Waterloo facilities, recreation centers, I believe some of the churches, as well as senior residents.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bowman has a special storage area in the basement of the Ark where he has thousands of them ready to go.
We can get you a stockpile if you want.
Yes. Great. Further questions, Councillor Bonagor, Councillor Freeman?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I just wanted to thank you for all of the work that you're doing. The age-friendly policies, they really are for everyone. And I really commend you for taking the initiative and taking those extra steps to start building something that's really rich and meaningful. And I can attest to this because I just happened to come across it in a city facility and I was flicking through it and it was great. So I actually want to kind of do half of this stuff. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yeah, thanks. This is really awesome. And I had a question about a program. My dad's 90, my mom's 87. They live in Woodstock. And in Oxford County area, they have something called Learning Unlimited, and it's for seniors. Is there anything like that in Waterloo region too, where you can sign up for 8 weeks of courses for $40 or something?
Yeah.
Like they're 90 years old and they're taking courses and using their iPad.
Right, and there is third age learning within the City of Waterloo, and so that's actually a brilliant way for older adults to be able to attend lectures that are offered by university faculty, as well as other experts in their respective fields. And then we've been having discussions with the universities of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University, and Conestoga College on the potential to offer small, minimal fee programs for older residents.
Yeah, like the courses that they do, my understanding is from Learning Unlimited, they're not university level kind of lectures. They're like I said, integration with new technology, and the library does a lot. But the thing is that this looks like it's run by Oxford County. That's the thing. It's a public run. It seems to be a public run thing, and they meet in Woodstock at a Unifor hall, and so it seats like 200 people. And Mom told me it's almost always sold out, and you can get a meal too beforehand if you want. So, anyways, I guess I just wanted to put that on the horizon for a few people, the region and everything, because I just thought it sounded like a really neat program.
And if I could add to that, I mean, the one twist that I think that we might want to add to that would be that the older adults that participate in this program wouldn't just be sort of the knowledge learners, that they would also be the knowledge givers, so that we also have a lot of expertise within our own community, so they can be empowered to be teachers as well as elders as we've described them.
Since I don't see any further, Dr. John, could you talk a bit about the student involvement that we have from the universities? And our meeting last time was half post-secondary students, and how they were were instrumental in bringing this to life.
Right. So what I've been doing is kind of capitalizing on my grad students to some extent to come into a number of our age-friendly events, and the evaluation process has been conducted by master students at the School of Planning. One of the contributors to the Aging Well directory has been Ashley Salvador, who's about to graduate from our program, as well as Anna Guess, who's a recent graduate from our program and has gone on to work with the IBI group. So this capacity to be able to work with community, to work with residents, has been enormously beneficial for not only their education but also their career advancement.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. And that's it for delegations today. Moving on to consent motion. 2 items on the consent motion: the fourth quarter health and safety report, significant festivals and events report. Moved by Councillor Reith, seconded by Councillor Henry. Any questions? One question. Councillor Bodley, go ahead.
Sorry, get myself organized here. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I was just curious about the financial aspects of the health and safety report. it said that there was $143,000 in cost savings. And I'm just curious sort of how if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on how that gets handled for perhaps us new councillors, where that comes from, where it goes, how do we see it?
Okay, sorry, my voice is a little bit raspy through you, Mayor Jarowski, to Councillor Badali. So the costs for the claims are mostly allocated back to the divisions. So if there's an employee off in a certain division, the cost is allocated to them. Now there is some reserves for presumptive claims, but apart from that, the savings are within the divisions.
And just if I could follow up through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I know that my understanding in my brief time here is that sometimes, like when we have excess in our FTEs, like if we have an FTE assigned and we're not paying for them, that money sometimes goes into our reserves. And I'm curious whether any consideration to this money going into our reserves, particularly given the infrastructure problems that we're going to be facing in the coming years, whether any consideration has ever been given to that.
I might move this up to our CFO. Please go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. Any surplus that remains in the departments, we do bring the surplus deficit report to Council. It does go into our reserves, the CRF and the CURF. Off the top of my head, I think it's 75-25 how it goes through. So it, by default, does go into the reserves that support our infrastructure. That's with our year-end surplus.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All of us, thank you. Staff reports. Item A, Community Cash Grants 2019, prepared by Darcy, but I understand Beth's going to do a stand-in for any questions that we might have on this, and Jim as well. Thank you. Welcome. Any questions of staff on this one? Oh, Councillor Bonnegar.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I had a question about the Community Cash Grant. I was just wondering, is the point of the program to provide some funding to every applicant? Because it seemed, when looking at the breakdown of who received what, very few groups got their full amount, many got partial amounts. So I'm just wondering, is there kind of a parameter to begin with when it comes to those allocations?
Through you, Mayor. Historically, that is how the program has operated, that all applications are assessed for eligibility. If they're eligible, they're then scrutinized more closely by the committee to determine if there is indeed a need for funding. And the committee then attempts to use the money to help as many of the eligible applicants as possible. Looking at what they've asked for, assessing what they might actually need to operate their program, or if it's a project, is there an opportunity for them to scale back but still proceed? So they're trying to spread out the dollars to allow as many things as possible to move forward.
And is there? I understand that the committee makes those decisions, and we had the very good report letting us know about the efficacy of that process. Is it possible to make that decision-making process a little bit more transparent so that the groups who are applying can have a better understanding of how they may be able to better apply to the process, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Through you, Mayor. One of the things that staff does after the process is a letter goes out to any applicant, whether they were successful or not, and that includes tips on how to, on what they might want to consider for their next application, and also the name of the staff liaison and an expression that we're happy to help you, talk you through this process so that next time you can write a stronger application.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Bodley? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Less of a question, more of a comment. Just something that I read that really struck me when reading through the report was commentary about how the diversity of the committee really benefited perspectives as you were determining who was getting funding. And I think us here at Council, and also just in general when we're recruiting committee members, this needs to continue to be top of mind for us, that not just within the Community Cash Grants Committee, but across all committees, we need to do a better job of making sure that we have diversity within those committees. Just wanted to highlight that from the report. Thank you.
I don't think we have a mover or seconder as yet. Moved by Councillor Hanmer, who seems to want to speak about it.
I did.
Okay.
Also.
Okay.
Thank you. Just more of a comment back to the
sure.
staff as the council liaison for the cash grant committee, the very absent liaison because I was sick this year. I did have the privilege, though, of reading through all the materials and meeting with the staff before the committee started, and I would like to commend the staff for the work that you did in preparing the committee and for the committee itself in the thoughtful deliberation about the cash grants. And to Councillor Bonnegard, it's not easy to choose who's getting what, and having been on the other side of it as well, I think the committee did a really good job in trying to make sure that it was meaningful, the contributions that were made. So congratulations to the team.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Fasick, please.
Through you, Chair. The thing I wanted to share that I learned when I asked these guys questions was that one of the great things about the cash grants versus like applying to the community foundation is that the city can support grassroots organizations that are like not nonprofit or charitable organizations. So it gives a lot more flexibility. So I think that's an opportunity for councillors when we see groups that might not have actual status but might have a really project of merit, that we can encourage them to apply through this grant.
Thank you. And for the 4 new councillors on here, you can already see the extra money at work that we just approved a few weeks ago being invested in the community. All those in favor? So let's thank you, and thank you, Beth and Jim, for standing in. Next up, Spur Line Trail Crossing at Union Street East. Report prepared by Louise, and we have a delegation here. Kate well, there's no presentation, right, Louise? No. Okay. A delegation here, Kate Glasson. Welcome. And then after we hear from the delegation, then we'll get into question and answer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Just briefly wanted to say I've looked at the proposal that you put for a pedestrian island in the middle of Union Street at Spurline Trail. I think this fails to back up Waterloo's commitment to encouraging active transportation. What I would like to propose, if this is possible, is there's a couple of possibilities I could see. And I should point out that I live within about 30 yards of this crossing, so I hear the brakes slamming all the time when people are trying to cross that place with their strollers, on their bikes, all kinds of problems. It's a dangerous, dangerous place. In the winter, because we don't have sidewalk clearing, it's one of the only ways I can get around. As you can see, I use a mobility assist. That means that when the sidewalks are icy and slippery, I can't use them, but the trail gets cleared. That means that I need that place to have a crosswalk or something like it. It needs to be marked that cars have to give way to pedestrians at that crossing, because otherwise somebody is going to get killed. We are a city trying to encourage active transportation. We are trying to encourage people to use the trails that we developed, and I think the best way we can do that is by installing a crosswalk there. Now, the immediate obvious objection is, well, there's a crosswalk not 50 yards away or 50 feet away at Union and Moore. What I would suggest is changing that from a stoplight to stop signs on Moore Street and putting in a proper crosswalk, or even a light junction at that place, because it's a very dangerous crossing. People are running down that road at 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour, and somebody's going to get killed. And I don't want to be standing there watching it when it happens, and I sure as heck don't want it to be me. So I think that we underestimate how important the spur line is to people who live in that part of Waterloo in terms of being able to get around in the winter. Because it's cleared, it's actually one of the only places I can actually go in the winter. It's not uncommon for me during the winter to be stuck in my apartment for a week on end. If I can't use the trail safely, then I'm stuck. And that's not healthy. That kind of isolation is mentally unwell. It's bad for mental health, it's bad for physical health. And generally, something needs to be done about it. It needs a crosswalk. We need to encourage people to use that crossing, and the only way to do it is to find a way to stop the cars, because people can't kill car drivers kill people. It's just that simple. If I get hit by a car there on Union Street, the odds are very good that it'll kill me, because they're going way faster than they're allowed to, and nobody does anything about it. There's never any speed traps. There's never any effort to make people slow down on that street, and it's dangerous. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Very concise. Just one question from me before I get to the councillors if they have questions. I just want to make sure that in the report they indicate that this was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Louise, but a temporary measure, as there's going to be a full reconstruction of that area just in a couple of years. This is just a temporary measure.
Okay.
Am I right? Okay. I just want to make sure that you'd heard of that, and then it's consultation for what the full measure will be.
Right. So I've got to go another 2 years like that?
Well, we'll find out more from we'll be able to ask staff more about that.
Because
I just wondered if you had read that part. Wait.
I've lived there for 12 years already, and it's been dangerous for those 12 years I've lived there.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure you knew this temporary only, full solution coming at the reconstruction.
Okay. But, do we know what the full solution will be?
No, that's detailed in the report. We'll be able to ask questions. You'll be able to hear a bit more later.
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions from council. I see Councillor Bonagor.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So yeah, the plans are in motion. So this is a question for Kate, or just questions in general to the report.
We'll get to questions of staff. We'll get to questions of staff after this. It's questions for the delegate on her concerns of what she knows. So
no, that's okay. I think you did a great job. My questions are for staff. Okay, thanks.
Okay, questions of the delegate. Seeing none. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Now we'll have questions of staff. Let's go to Neil. Councillor Bonagor on that.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. So I mean, as the Mayor said, this is an interim measure moving towards a permanent fix during the reconstruction, and the design process is underway for that. And just for the public's understanding, that project was listed as non-routine during the last budget, so that there will be additional opportunities there for public input. So we have set this project aside as being of very high importance to the community, and through that process there should be, you would have already had a chance to have input. This will, by intent, give additional measures to have that input, because as you said, it is a really important crossing and it's not where we need it to be right now. Moving towards, I realize this is a temporary thing, but in the report, it seemed to indicate that lights, having some kind of signals there, were the primary, the best option. But that's not been put forward here. How can we make sure that that is still an option that's on the table, looking towards that permanent solution?
Through you, Chair Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor. So we looked at a number of options, and a signal came up. It was warranted, but because it's so close to the signal at Moore, there's a challenge. It is possible. The signals have to be coordinated. The system the region is not as up to date as some systems you'll see. So coordination of signals that are very close together is a challenge for the region. So the region owns all the signals. So we're kind of caught between a regional jurisdiction and what the city is responsible for. So again, through more data collection over the time that the PED refuge will be in place, we'll monitor it and see how it operates, and gather that data to either make a recommendation to the region to ask for signals, if that appears to be the best option at that time. So we've been, I guess our challenge is time. So we could continue to monitor and approach the region and work on that, or we can put something in place that we think will work. And make a much bigger and make a significant improvement over what we have today. So that's our approach. Signals could be they came up high in the technical scoring, but because it's so close to the intersection at Moore, we have a curve, we have sight distance issues. They can be looked at through the full reconstruction of the road. So a number of things can be improved. But when we're just dealing with this crossing, we're kind of limited to what we can make work.
So I just wanted to make sure the community understands that that's not off the table.
Right.
But it's all very much a discussion in process, and they will get a chance to have a say in that. Great, thank you.
I think the irony here is the fact that this is, normally it's a city trail and a regional road. This time it's a regional trail and a city street. But at the regional level, just in this past budget, we did make an investment towards smart traffic signals, which a lot of people would know from this community is a strength of our community in terms of technology, and to move towards that. So maybe to staff, this is an opportunity for the region to say, as they move forward with their smart traffic signals, this might be an opportunity here to test the pedestrian and other light and railway interaction, which isn't much of interaction with rail around here, but nonetheless. Further questions? I think Councillor Beith, were you on or no? Okay, Freeman, Bodley, Vasek. Okay.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Just the delegate kind of caught my eye. She wanted confirmation that the pedestrian island is snow is removed all winter on the pedestrian island.
Yes, it will be maintained by our staff.
And then, can you better explain why, or like, were crosswalk markings considered for this section, and whether they're included in the design or they're not, and why?
So our challenge in Ontario, the only way to give pedestrians the right of way is with a full signal, or there's a level 2 crossing flashing lights, but we don't have any of those flashing lights in the region. So it's a consistency problem. Drivers are not used to it. So without those kind of controls, we can't actually put in a crosswalk that would indicate the pedestrian has the right of way. So unfortunately, between the Highway Traffic Act and our constraints in the area, sight lines and so forth, the pedestrian is not, doesn't have full right of way that we would like to see on that particular crossing, because it is a lot that does have a lot of users. So there are being revisions to the Highway Traffic Act being considered under a new Ontario traffic manual. Those are not complete yet. So there's possibly some improvements coming. A lot of other provinces seem to be able to handle it, but Ontario is not one of those. So part of our problem is being in this province and trying to maintain consistency with other municipalities.
Are there any tools that we can implement associated with signage to give people, give drivers a heads up that there's a trail crossing? Like, we do have trail crossing signs, I think, there, but they're not very visible, and I just didn't know if there's something more we can do on that front.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking at that when we do the detailed design for the island and include signage and painting. We can paint the center line will divide around the island, so we can make the travel lanes feel narrower. The drivers will actually have to veer a little bit to avoid the island. So all of these things will work to slow them down. Right now, there's not much that would slow drivers down. So we think those improvements, sight lines, all the other signs for the rail crossing for the next intersection, it is a kind of confusing spot. So again, through the detailed design, we'll look at all of that more carefully. So when the trail was built, the region put the trail in, and they wanted to look at the crossings at a later time, and this is the time that we're trying to deal with this particular crossing. So we know there's deficiencies, there are things we can do to make it better, and that's what we'll try to do through this. It's a small project, but signs and paint are cheap, so that's something we can improve.
And my only other question was, is there any way to basically illuminate that crossing in some way? Like, even if it's reflective banding at the trail edge or trailhead, or reflective bandings like the entire bollard or something that goes into the trail. So there's this real something that really jumps out to the driver's eye when they come around more.
Yeah, the signs we put on the island, they're reflective. There is lighting on the trail, so again, it's something we can check. You know, the lighting levels, could they be improved a little bit? So, and I think with the reflective bollards, drivers will definitely see the island, and that there is something there. So I think that's something that we will look at more carefully in the next few weeks.
And just on the pedestrian safety on again from the region, I remember that one of the biggest successes in slowing down drivers was on Victoria Street with the Iron Horse Trail crossing there, that the speeds plummeted because the drivers it was so narrow, the drivers really slowed down for it. Perhaps an opportunity here. Councillor Bodley, Councillor Beats.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, hate to be the financial person again here, but I'm going to ask the question. So it's $7,500 is what I saw here. Can you maybe speak to what I know it's coming out of the pedestrian island capital budget line item? Can you speak to what the implications might be for other pedestrian islands in the city? Is this going to restrict our ability to put pedestrian islands anywhere else? Is there any issues therein?
I think we've looked at like our priorities for now, and we budgeted for those. So I think so. It's not going to have an immediate impact. Obviously, if we had more money, we could do more improvements. We've looked at the priority ones, and a lot of these are also being done through other projects. So it's not necessarily funded just from this particular line item.
Perfect, thank you. And if I could just speak to the delegate's point around enforcement. I know that's not under our purvey, but I know we do have the ability to put this on the STEP program, so for increased enforcement through the Waterloo Regional Police, and I'd just like to make sure that that gets put onto that program if it hasn't already, to make sure that we do have some awareness to this section per the delegate's point.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, Councillor Veith, Vasek, and Freeman.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So I want to talk a bit about the intersection project. That is a City of Waterloo project. The Moore.
You mean at Moore and Union? That's a city intersection, yeah.
Okay, and what's the timeline?
The reconstruction.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know if Mr. Ormson or Mr. De Toronto want to answer this. It is in our capital budget, so detailed design is being started, but there's a number of issues to consider. So, Mr. Ormson.
Here in our report that commenced design in 2019, construction 2021. But Ron's there now. Hi, Ron.
Yeah, forgive me, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. I didn't entirely hear the question. Was it
just like when is the work going to be done on the intersection at Moore and Union? Like, what's the time? Like,
yeah. So
it's the whole street, or is it just the? Okay.
Yeah, it's the entire street from King Street over to Moore, Councillor Veith. Yeah.
So
design 2019 and anticipated construction 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So I probably shouldn't say this, but in my ward, roundabouts have worked to calm traffic. So I was wondering if that is something that's being considered for that intersection down the road, because I think, it's close enough to where the trail, and maybe that would be an option, just to take the lights out, put in a roundabout. And
yeah, through you, Mayor. Certainly we'll look at all options. I can't guarantee any feasibility about a roundabout there because of the real estate constraints, but we would certainly look at that as the suite of options that would be available. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Councillor Vasek, Councillor Freeman.
Okay, so I have a thought. So in terms of, as an opportunity really, in terms of like what data we want to collect, right? So if a pedestrian refuge goes in there right now before the lights at Moore and Union, we're collecting data on what impacts the pedestrian refuge, or anyways, the data we're collecting is around a pedestrian refuge. So, but what we really want to know is, I think, is what is it like to have a crosswalk there as well as the lights, right? That would be the data you'd want later on. And so my thought is, like at Woolwich and University, there were temporary lights there, right, for a period of time. So I guess I'm curious, like, is this an opportunity to put temporary crosswalk there and collect data around the impact of a crosswalk on the lights? Since we're only putting in something temporary anyways, why not put in something temporary that we can actually, like, we can collect the data we want to collect? Thoughts?
So again, from a safety point of view, we have to be careful what we actually put in place. So it has to conform with Ontario regulations and so forth, sight lines. So as I've said, it's a complicated spot because of the restricted sight lines, the curve. We do know that the cars are speeding. They're traveling much too fast. So one of the pieces of data we will collect is data before the island goes in, and then data after the island. From our experience, from where we put these in and where we've narrowed lanes, we have seen a considerable reduction in speed. So if we reduce the speed on Union, that would be the biggest factor to improve safety for everyone else. So again, we're restricted in because of the railway and the existing driveway. So all of these things are working against us to put in, say, the Cadillac of anything because of the various constraints that we have. So to do something temporary, it still has to conform to guidelines published by the province and Ontario Traffic Manual for consistency, for safety. Because if we were to do something unusual or that didn't meet those guidelines, it increased the risk for the city. So if somebody is hit and it doesn't conform, a driver could sue us because they're going to be implicated in a lawsuit as well. So that's why we wouldn't do something that doesn't conform to those other guidelines.
Okay, thanks. So does a temporary crosswalk not conform to the guidelines?
In that situation, because we can't, the only way to stop a car, to give the pedestrian right of way, like a crosswalk, we don't have any of those in the city of Waterloo anywhere. So again, there was a pilot project in Elmira where they had a level 2 crossover, and that was, again, it conformed to the provincial guidelines, but at the same time, the data didn't show that it actually provided the benefit they were looking for, and one of is not a good measure of consistency across the region. So we have a committee. Our transportation operations folks sit on that committee to look at, so we're consistent across the other 3 municipalities and our neighboring municipalities of what we do. So as far as signage and types of facilities and so forth, we're trying to push the envelope as much as we can to stay within those guidelines and try to help pedestrians. But it's, anyway, all of those reasons are still kind of working against us. So all I can say is our experience with the islands, they've had a very positive effect and reduce speeds and provide safety for the pedestrians.
And before I turn the microphone back to you, just a reminder that we're here today either to approve a pedestrian refuge island, not approve it, or defer it and in favor of something else. So we're really not here today to approve other types of crossings. It's just whether or not we want this one. So, but back to you.
I might have missed this in the report then. Is the plan to also reduce the traffic speed then to 40 there? No, can we? And temporarily? Maybe permanently?
It's not a place we could sign at 40. We can advise because they're coming away from a signal or they're approaching a signal. So again, because of the curve, they're not seeing the signal till they're almost there. By putting signage further back for the ped crossing or the pedestrian island, that gives drivers a little more warning. And the painting we would do on the road is actually to narrow the lanes and to guide the cars around the island. So again, it'll make that travel lane feel narrower, which will have a speed reducing factor.
Now that exact thought came to my mind, but as our staff are doing work with the City of Kitchener looking at potential for 40-kilometer-an-hour zones and that, it might be worthwhile adding to that any trail crossing zones might be 40. I think this council would be interested in that as well. So I see Tim taking notes there, so that's probably a good thing.
And
I always called you Commissioner. Go ahead.
I would like to add, just through our transportation master plan, we are looking at the 40 zones. We have a number in place around school zones at this time. So to measure the overall effectiveness to see how they actually work. So our experience though is if we just put up, we have a wide road and we just put up signs that reduce the speed, they don't work. So we need to do other things, physical measures to actually make people feel like the road is narrower or feel that their speed is too high. Those are the things that work. So that is not the cheapest answer. The cheapest part is putting in signs, but they're not very effective.
Thank you very much, Phil. Turning back to Councillor Freeman for one last word, I think.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you, the 2.5 meter wide, is that a wide enough pedestrian refuge, or are we going to be criticized like we were on Weber Street with the width of that refuge?
And I think it's 275.
Yeah.
Sorry, 275.
So it will accommodate a bicycle and a trailer. So unfortunately, the island we get criticized for is not our project. It's on a regional road, and we made it as wide as we could, or the region did, to try to without because of again, we have a driveway, we have an intersection, and if we go the other side, we have a culvert that's going to be replaced in the next couple of years. So there were reasons why it was put where it was, but it also limited the width that was possible. So I agree, we'd like them to be wider than what is there, but I think this island will be, it will be wider than the one on Weber Street, and it will accommodate a bike and a trailer.
And can you just explain, like, my understanding is that even if there's a crosswalk marking, unless there's some other tool to stop cars, pedestrians do not have the right of way. They're required to make sure the way is clear before they cross. Is that true?
That's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Is there anybody here today who would like a pedestrian refuge island on Union Street, even temporarily? Councillor Bonnegar does. Anybody else? Councillor Veith does. All those in favor? Okay. Thank you, and thank you very much to Kate for coming out today and expressing the interest as a real user of that trail, regular user of that trail 12 months a year. So thank you very much for that, Kate. Next up, and thank you, Louise, Phil, Ron. Award of tender RFT 1907 reconstruction of Moccasin Drive, part of Longwood Drive, and replacement of the Albert Street culvert. As you might imagine, there's no presentation on this one, but Councillor Henry would like to move it. Okay, Councillor Freeman, back to Councillor Henry.
Thank you, and I know I've asked this offline, but I think it would be helpful for council to hear the answer online. I imagine it's the same question Councillor Freeman has. Oh, I thought you did, but it is relatively unusual, but not unprecedented, for us to have only one bid come back from projects like these. And while it's over budget, I saw that staff did some negotiation to bring it back closer to budget. So I just wanted to hear staff's comment on whether they feel the price that we're getting on this is a fair price, given the lack of competition here, and how they and how you feel confident in that prescription.
Through you, Chair Jaworski, staff are confident that this is a fair price. Although it's unprecedented, it's not impossible to have a single bid. We compared it to the consultant engineer's cost estimate, and it's close to the cost estimate, and reviewed it against other bids recently. And we were able to clarify certain things with the contractor regarding the scope of work so that we were able to get them to sharpen their pencil, so to speak, to bring the price down.
Okay. And I had a question too, Gavin. Just on page 6 of the report, the funding reallocation request in order to fund this. The last item on there, it said $125,000 will come from pedestrian bridge replacement. I was wondering if maybe I could get some further information from that, either from your team or from finance, on where that money is actually coming from. What aren't we doing there, or is that a reallocation of some no impact to the community or council even?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I'm going to jump in on that one. So we sourced the additional funds from projects that had some surplus and contingency remaining that we thought were applicable to the scope and the elements at hand. One of the things that's noted is that the Waterloo trail through there is not continuous right now, and there was an opportunity to make that connection across there. That's something that was planned in the AT, Active Transportation Program, already, and those funds were set aside for a portion of that work. But we were unable to previously complete it due to the culvert and other underground infrastructure conditions and conflicts that were there. So it is an appropriate source for that. It's something they've wanted to do for a while, but we needed this project to go ahead to be able to do all that.
So it's active transportation funds for active transportation.
That's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Councillor Bodley has a question. Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, keeping with my finance theme, I guess. So in my review of this, it says that there's $877,000 increase in the budget due to a change in the scope, which is basically with respect to stormwater management. And so I'm curious if which we are saying was going to need to be done 2020 to 2022 anyways. So my question is, in previous capital budgets, would that stormwater management funding have been shown separately from the reconstruction of the road, or did we only identify that the stormwater management portion was necessary when we went out to scope the project for the reconstruction of the road?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I would say that our scoping of some of these elements is evolving over time. We in some cases in the past wouldn't have these structural inspections wouldn't have been done at the time that the budget was created. So these are new information. In this case, we did add a little bit through the last year's budget process, but we needed to add more simply just because we didn't have enough information at the time until the inspection was completed and more detailed information was obtained to be able to properly estimate it. So.
Very good, thank you. And sorry to follow up through you, Mayor Jaworski. Again, this is maybe a process question. So my understanding on the reallocation portion of this, so we're taking the funds from projects that were in a surplus position. And I guess I'm just curious about how that funding exists. Like, is it just, if a capital project goes into a surplus position, does that money just sit there in the anticipation that we're going to have other projects that are in a deficit position? At some point in time, does that money go back into reserves? What's the sort of process, I guess, for that?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. So there is a year-end reporting process that we undertake in cooperation with finance each year. It's called job cost reporting, but basically every year we look at all the projects that are either in progress or are completed and assess any remaining funds. And most of the time, if there's remaining money, it goes back to from whence it came, the reserves. On occasion, such as these that you see there on the table, there were some surplus funds that we were able to divert to other projects that have similar scope elements and similar funding sources that we can redirect appropriately. And that's all governed through existing finance in place that we follow on a yearly basis.
Awesome. Thank you for the clarification.
We have something that's been moved and seconded. In favor? Thank you. E, draft inventory of significant cultural heritage landscapes. And I know Michelle Lee is coming up for one to do a presentation. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, and thank you to Council for the opportunity to speak. I want to provide a brief overview of the report in front of you. I know some of you weren't on Council at the time that the terms of reference came forward, so I think it would be a great opportunity now just to provide a brief overview of the study and to give you a sense of what the next steps are. So the study is really intended to develop an inventory of significant cultural heritage landscapes in response to the province's requirement that we conserve significant cultural heritage landscapes. We also have policies in our regional official plan and our local official plan that speak to conserving significant landscapes. And it was recognized that without understanding what these landscapes are and where they are and what features they might have, we can't go forward and do that conservation if we don't know what we're conserving. So the study was initiated a few years ago to identify what these landscapes might be. Obviously, there are other good reasons for conserving cultural heritage landscapes that are detailed in the report. They include sort of ensuring that the city has a good sense of place, and there are reasons for people to live and stay here, and we have a vibrant community. I want to speak a few minutes to the issue of what a cultural heritage landscape actually is in terms of its definition. It's really just an area, a broader area of heritage significance. It's not limited necessarily to a single small property. It usually includes multiple properties or maybe a single large property, and it has multiple resources located on that property. Those resources can be built heritage or they can be natural features, and together they tell a story or create an important sense of character about that place. The PPS defines that's the provincial policy statement, defines cultural heritage landscapes as an area of heritage significance that may have been modified by human activities and is valued by a community. So that formal definition is what guided us through this study. But really, when you're just reading the report, think of it as a larger area that has many resources as opposed to a single individual resource. Cultural heritage landscapes can take many shapes or forms. They can be agricultural landscapes, they can be neighborhoods, they can be cemeteries in former industrial areas. All of these have one thing in common, and that is they have built features, but they also have maybe landscape features such as mature trees or certain setbacks or certain laneways or cobblestone roads, those types of things that all work together to create a sense of place. The region of Waterloo provided the area municipalities with a guideline document on how to identify and conserve cultural heritage landscapes. So that is the document that we have used to guide this study. And what they did is they took that PPS definition and they broke it down into its component parts. So they created a set of criteria that actually map quite nicely onto that definition. And the criteria are three-pronged. The landscape, to be considered significant, the landscape has to have cultural heritage value or interest, which is defined under the Ontario Heritage Act. It has to have some sense of value to the community, and it has to have some kind of integrity. So that means that there has to still be something there in the landscape worth conserving. It has to have something tangible that you can still see. We decided locally that significant cultural heritage landscapes in our community would be those that meet all three criteria in a fairly strong way. We were looking for candidates that meet a high threshold of significance. And as you can see, we got an inventory back of 27. If we were to set the bar a little lower, we were concerned that we might just include the entire city, and I'm not sure that that would be effective in terms of planning. So the inventory is step one in terms of the broader framework for this project. So the purpose of this report and then the subsequent report that will be coming to you in May is simply to identify what's significant. The report doesn't include any recommendations about what's to be done. We're proposing that those or that action or activity will be carried out in subsequent studies and plans. That means that should Council approve the inventory in May, the finalized inventory, we would then initiate technical studies for each of the individual landscapes that would help us understand those landscapes in more detail, and we would have a customized plan for each landscape to address the specific features and the specific needs of each landscape. So it's a tailor-made approach. Some of those landscapes will be requiring very in-depth study, and they'll be very complex, but many others will be fairly well managed already and may need just a cursory review to see where there are any gaps in how we're managing those landscapes. This diagram gives you a sense of the range of types of actions that would happen at the end of that three-step process. And so it shows you that the types of plans that we might develop could range anywhere from a simple action of a recommended action of celebrating the landscape, so providing better signage or promoting the landscape, all the way through to more interventionist actions that could involve designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. And as you can imagine, not every landscape will be on any one end of the spectrum. We are looking at the full range of actions and trying to determine what might be most appropriate for the landscape given its features and its needs. As part of this examination, we're also going to be seeking public input from the community to help define what those actions might be, and we'll be coming back to council before any actions are in place. So that's the subsequent process. Back to the inventory. We did quite a considerable amount of community engagement at the very outset. The idea was that we wanted to provide a little bit of guidance about what might be the candidate cultural heritage landscapes, but we also wanted to hear from the community to get their views before we colored their perceptions. So we did quite a bit of engagement before announcing what the candidates might be. And that engagement involved focus groups, presentations, lots of emails to multicultural groups, neighborhoods, trying to understand what the areas were that people valued. Those areas were then taken by our consultant, and I apologize, Lindsay Benjamin is sitting there. She's representing our consultant, and I failed to introduce her. So our consultants then took those landscapes and then applied the 3 criteria that were established by the region to determine if they met the full range of criteria for identifying significance. The outset of that was the identification of 27 landscapes that appear to meet the criteria for significance. They're identified in a very tiny map in your report, so they're very hard to see. And I'm happy to share a higher resolution map with you after this council meeting. And there will be also a map published online. This map, as you can see, really does show quite a concentration in the uptown. And I just wanted to reflect on that a little bit to make the comment that that's not because the uptown is the only place that has interesting areas in it. That's really a reflection of the historical development of the city and the fact that the uptown has 200 or more years of built form that isn't present in some of the more peripheral areas. And so therefore it just had more landscapes. It also has a more diverse urban form. And so it was identified as having more landscapes. This inventory is being proposed to be a living document. And so as the city evolves and grows and changes, it could well mean that we reevaluate the inventory in 10 years and find that something that seemed like it didn't quite make a good match with the criteria now suddenly there seems to be a stronger case. And so that is something we're proposing as part of this study, that the inventory be a living document that is reassessed throughout time. There were some landscapes that were identified at the outset by community groups that, while being very culturally important for recreation or for environmental reasons, didn't meet the test for heritage significance. And these are identified here. Bechtel Park, Laurel Creek Conservation Area, a number of those, they had all sorts of value, but we just didn't feel that they were strong candidates as cultural heritage landscapes. And there are probably very appropriate mechanisms to ensure that their features are conserved, but we felt that the cultural heritage landscape tool was maybe not one of them. In terms of next steps, we've got more public consultation happening between April and May. We're proposing to release the report to the community, see if we've heard them, reach out to additional individuals that may not have heard about the study up until now. And then we're proposing to consolidate that feedback and bring a report back in May with a finalized inventory to council, as well as a set of priorities and next steps. So in that report, what we would like to do is establish a set of criteria for prioritizing landscapes and to propose those landscapes that meet the criteria for being addressed in the short term. And I think it's safe to say that we would like to continue reevaluating that priority list as time goes on because new opportunities arise. But at least as a first cut, we would like to bring back a report that says where we think we should head with the inventory. So Lindsay and I are happy to answer questions, and I'll be over there.
Thank you, Michelle, for that 270-page report. It was really nice. No, really good. Well done, and lots of information there. I have some questions, but I see Councillor Veith. Did you have your hand up? Okay, Councillor Veith, Henry. Okay, we'll go around.
Thank you for the report. The pictures were awesome as well. It was fun. We were in the office today looking at some of the historical pictures, and not that long ago, but how the city's changed in a few years. When I was reading the executive summary, the little bit about the Wilmot line popped out to me. We have cross-boundary agreements with the township on that road, and it concerned me that it's not in there because there's a lot of environmental things going on there. It's always lots of 1,000 cars a week apparently use that, and I would suggest that the majority of the people that use that road, considering the populations of the township of Wilmot and the city of Waterloo, the majority of those people are Waterloo residents that use the Wilmot line, and I just would like to make sure that we pull or that we could somehow acknowledge to the Wilmot Council that this did come up. It's not on our list, but we would, like to reach out to them to see where they are with this, and that we would support any kind of report that came. If they were doing a similar report, that we would support that. So, and I know because it's not our road that. It doesn't seem like it should be included, but I think citizens of Waterloo should be concerned with how that road is treated in the future. Just if we could have the clerk send...
Well, I think there's a regional one. Do you know the status of the Regional Cultural Heritage Review, Michelle, and how that might apply to that?
Okay. The region has given the ability of identifying cultural heritage.
Yeah, there's a few. So I've got a few questions. Depending on how the first one shakes out will depend on how many of my other ones I will ask Michelle. But the first one I think you've alluded to in your report, but I'd like to get a bit more specific. If we end up with 27, an inventory of 27 significant cultural heritage landscapes that we want to do phase 2 and phase 3 on, what have we got in terms of resources that may affect our ability to proceed? Like how long are we talking about to get through 27? What do we have that we think we could get through in the next few years? I just want to get a sense of scale so that when we see 27 come back in 2 months, we have an idea of what the future looks like.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. We have in our budget at the moment planned for 2 major studies. So those would be in the scale of a full, in-depth study that would be comparable to a Heritage Conservation District study and plan. However, so that's only 2 in the capital budget at the moment. I would say off the top of my head that a good 15 of the landscapes wouldn't, maybe even 20, wouldn't require that level of assessment and evaluation. A good number of them would actually, I think, be well suited for a staff level evaluation, maybe a gap analysis to look at what is missing under the current framework and in terms of how they're managed, and we could fill those gaps fairly easily and cheaply through, just addressing those issues through official plan amendments and that kind of thing. So I would say that off the top of my head, perhaps 8 to 10 landscapes might warrant more detailed study, and we've got funding for 2 of those.
I think that's helpful context as we consider budget. In terms of next steps between now and May, I saw you're going back to stakeholders. So there's I think 3 landscapes, potential landscapes that are owned by one major property owner in terms of the institutional settings. Have we heard much from them so far? And is that a place we're going to cycle back to and have more in-depth conversations with leadership at those institutions?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, absolutely. I think we have reached out to the University of Waterloo and Laurier in advance of the study, and as the study became more detailed in terms of what exactly about the campuses were we talking about or were we interested in, we were able to then provide them with a little bit more information. In discussions with the University of Waterloo specifically, we have spent a lot of time trying to come to an agreement on the type of landscape that we're talking about. And specifically, the University of Waterloo, we really are looking at that landscape as an evolving landscape. The intent at this point would not be to put significant restrictions on that landscape, but rather be more at the commemoration / promotion end of the spectrum in terms of the types of actions, and they seem to be comfortable with that. But we are continuing to work with those major stakeholders to make sure that they're comfortable with the
you're speaking of in terms of perhaps the challenges that that folks have experienced in terms of design choices and how well it adheres to the vision that's well described in the example, and how the owner has deviated over time from that vision in ways that may not be fully helpful, and so I think that's one of useful and thoughtful engagement, and we can consider how whether deferring fully is as useful as being a bit more assertive on what commemoration may look like in the future as they evolve. And I'll just provide a couple of comments, since I know you'll be looking for some around the table on some of these. When I look in my neck of the woods, I read with interest number 17 in McDougall, which I note from the lengthy report showed up during the process. It wasn't one of the ones that folks voted on because it wasn't there, I presume, at the time that that consultation went out. I'll note I'm a bit confused about the north of Keatsway part of that in terms of its coherence with the description of what that landscape is. It looks considerably different in terms of a number of elements north of Keatsway. And so I'd wonder about its boundaries on some of those. On number 19, which is Veterans Green and the original CMHC housing. I know we had a block plan in place for that area as part of the Northdale plan that attracted considerable commentary during that process. I'm not sure whether that's just review and make sure it's there, or whether that's one we'd reopen at some time down the road. But I think we'd have time for that. I wouldn't prioritize a significant review of that at this time, seeing that CMHC just appeared to do a significant reinvestment in the housing stock that it doesn't appear to be in much danger of changing anytime soon, with new roofs and new underground that just got dug up over the last few years in that space. And outside of my my ward, I just sort of, as staff goes around and thinks about that, there are some that are city-owned parcels of historic cultural interest because they're in the city, but region-wide they may not be. I'm thinking of number 1 as an example on all of this. And I know we have potential capital expense constraints for being able to fully realize what may be there, and I do ask that staff consider when we are doing this inventory whether prioritizing the resources to achieve that kind of cultural maintenance in the long term is reasonable on balance with all of our other priorities. I know we have challenges up in that particular area, and it may be beneficial on if we do get to priority for us to consider as a council whether that's the direction we'd want to go in the medium term or not, before starting to circle it and give people an indication that we've made up our mind on it. So those are the comments I have.
That reminds me, I have a friend who lives on McDougall, and over the weekend she wondered if this is just a ruse to never pave McDougall again, so I said I'd refer that to our ward councillor. Next up, Councillor Vasic.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. I've already asked so many questions like offline, but now as you're doing the presentation, it's making me think of another one, which is just around, and I don't think the city probably shouldn't take ownership of it, but one of the long-term recommendations in here is that the city, in coordination with the Grand River Conservation Authority and local Indigenous communities, continue to steward the existing public open space along the shores of the Grand River, and on and on. Not on and on, there's just a little, sorry. And so I guess what I'm wondering here is just, I'd like to have as part of the conversation before it comes back to council in May is like, would the Haldeman Tract be considered a cultural heritage landscape? I think that's risky because it then would say, oh, the city is now taking ownership of the Haldeman Tract as a cultural heritage landscape. So I don't initially believe that that's probably the right route, but to have it not show up in the study at all as sort of a significant landscape, even though it's a long-term recommendation, strikes me as just sort of something that we should probably really strongly consider how we want to put that in there. At least that would be my position. And so I'm saying it kind of just because I'd love to have more conversation with you and just to let my fellow council members know that that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Well, that's a good one. Let's see where this applies province-wide, so let's see what the province has to say too. Was there a question there as well? I don't remember. Okay, thanks. Next up, Councillor Bonagor, Bodley, Freeman, Himmer.
Through you, Chair Jaworski, I have a few questions when it comes to this report and the process itself. One of the things that I kept coming up to me again and again was whether this allows some kind of consideration for human cultural heritage within the city. So at the start of the report, it mentions past social structures, but that kind of mention doesn't seem to appear again. And so I have some questions around that, largely because we have rapidly gentrifying areas, particularly in the core. These residential neighborhoods, at their roots, they were very economically diverse. These were mixed suburbs. They were working class suburbs, as well as the first garden estates and that kind of thing. But I wasn't seeing much evidence of there being ways to protect social heritage of things like economic diversity in a landscape. A case in point would be the Menno Euclid neighbourhood. That's one of the listed, one of the 27 lists on the list. And it's cited for being like one area known for its modest homes. But anyone who walks through the neighbourhood will tell you that those modest homes are really disappearing, and the modesty of the homes is disappearing as they are renovated and upscaled, even maintaining the facade at the front. So I kept coming back to the question of what are we protecting with this approach, and is there a scope to protect social heritage? Because most of uptown residential areas are on the list for possible inclusion, and that could really affect options for affordable housing within these neighbourhoods and affordability of housing within these neighbourhoods. So I suppose my question is, how much does social history and social fabric play into the heritage discussion?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. That is a good question. I think my answer to that would be that really the tools that we have to manage cultural heritage landscapes usually revert back to managing the physical features of the landscape, not the use of the landscape and not the diversity of users in the landscape and economic backgrounds and that kind of thing. I think that's a really important issue, though, to not lose sight of, and that should be weighed against any tools that are being proposed for a landscape so that we don't create these enclaves of highly gentrified, unaffordable houses. So I think that any tools have to be used quite thoughtfully to make sure that we're addressing the built form in a way that we think is appropriate while still inviting that social diversity that you're talking about. So I think it'll depend on the landscape and the pressures that landscape is seeing. But I think that's a really good question. I think that it's a concern for many of the neighborhoods in the uptown, for sure.
Kind of flowing on from that, so when you're doing your follow-up engagement in April and May, when we're talking about impacted stakeholders, it does reach beyond the people that live in an area. The people who are impacted by these discussions might be the people who want to one day live in that area, and they might be blocked out of it. So I'm wondering if there's what plans you have to kind of reach beyond the people that you already reach, if you know what I mean, to get them involved in this discussion.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Another good question, and I would say that I hadn't actually put a lot of thought into reaching out to prospective buyers or folks that don't have an immediate stake in the landscape, but that may someday have a stake in the landscape. I'll have to actually put some thought into how I might reach out to those. There's the KW Real Estate Association that can disseminate information to prospective buyers, but off the top of my head, that's a really tough, intangible group of people to target. So
I didn't really mean prospective buyers. It was more the case of just underrepresented groups,
right.
Groups that they're not yet represented within this discussion.
Yeah.
So you have the groups who live there. That's great, because they're going to be talking to you.
Yeah.
But how do we get in some groups that may not be represented there yet?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, I am open to suggestions. We did reach out to as many diverse groups as possible in the initiation of this study, and unfortunately we really got very little response. I think partly because the study seemed so abstract, and it was really hard for people to really latch on to an idea. Now that we're at a stage where we actually have the landscapes listed, we've got a description, I'm hoping those same contacts and try and reach out again to those groups and get as a feedback as we possibly can.
That sounds awesome. One last point, if I may. The historical thematic framework that is cited, it starts by discussing prehistoric habitation. I just make a request that we not use that phrasing. Elsewhere we talk about indigenous habitation and pre-contact habitation. If we could use those terms as give them preference, I would greatly appreciate that, and I think some of my fellow councillors would as well. Thank you.
Next up, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. So first, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Beath had said around the Wilmot line. There's a specific commentary about two of the 27 potential CHLs that are shared with the City of Kitchener. So although I recognize we don't own any of the Wilmot line, I think some commentary around that would be helpful based on the commentary that Mayor Jaworski said as well too. Second thing for me, as I was reading through this report, admittedly for the first time, a lot of it for me is around expectation setting for the stakeholders that are reviewing this document. And I know when you had talked about possible actions, you're talking about celebrate, incent, plan, and guide, or conserve. And I think when that report comes back to council, I mean, for me, I'd really like to know, even if this is not what it's being held to, even if this is just a general thought process. This is what we think. For example, this CHL is going to be celebrate or incent, or like where it is on the scale would be really helpful for me. I certainly enjoyed reading the report and looking through some of the heritage aspects of everything that's in there, but without knowing what even broad planning is around each of these, it's hard for me to overly comment on it. So I'll just leave that with you. And then my last thing is around, again, this is sort of along the lines of expectation settings, but I'm going to use a specific example. So the town of Herbsville, which is in my ward, is listed on there. And so with respect to the expectation setting, if that gets designated as a CHL, I'm curious as to what that means, and whether other jurisdictions are then going to take that to say, you know, and I'll give this example. We just had an open house for the Herbsville South public consultation for Herbsville South development that's going on, and one of the main takeaways from residents at the consultation was around improving the safety of the road on Herbsville, which is a regional road, and we don't have any control over that. And I would hate to see the region come to us and say, well, that's a cultural heritage landscape, so we can't do anything there. So this is kind of along the lines of what I mean with respect to expectation setting. So I don't know if I have a question in there, just a bunch of comments, I guess.
And good ones. So it's good. Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. With regard to, I focused a lot on the Colonial Acres piece, because the other items identified within my ward seemed well expected. So the meeting house, the Mennonite meeting house, the Elam Martin farm, and some of the other pieces. But council may or may not know this, but Colonial Acres wants desperately to be Waterloo's first heritage landscape. As a community, they've been asking for this for at least a year and a half. And it may be one of the very low-hanging fruit that could be done within the staff realm, as opposed to taking up resources for a big study. The community, I don't know, they provided at least probably 100 pieces of documentation about the history of Colonial Acres to you. One of the pieces on the community value that I didn't understand wasn't checked off was the aspect of, under community values, the quality of life, because the neighborhood itself is one that is utilized by surrounding neighbors. They walk through it on purpose because of the high amount of shade, the varying architecture that resides in there. In the wintertime, they walk through there because of the low traffic volumes. Sometimes they want to see the winter lights, the holiday lights. And the other thing is because of the low lighting levels, the street lights, it's one of the few parts of Waterloo where we come closer to a dark sky kind of lighting. So there's a lot of people that would attribute a true night sky as being improved health and wellness. So I think that that's something that would be of help if you could look at that. Like more broadly within my community, there are a lot of people lined up ready to see this happen.
Thank you. And now over to my ward councillor, Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, I guess.
Actually, I'm last, so I might
You're
be
last.
least, so.
Okay. So lots of the questions through you, Mayor, have been asked, but I like to look at things in a longer term. So I really appreciated having all of the pictures here and can see what we're trying to preserve and why. But what seems to be and what is of interest to me are not the 27, but 28 to 37. As we're planning and looking at where we're developing things, should we be mindful of those that didn't make the list this time but may have some value to us from a cultural landscape standpoint as moving forward? And being in a ward, what kept coming home, being in a Ward 1, which really doesn't have anything right now because of the age and stage of that particular neighborhood. However, as we're looking at planning and redeveloping certain things or developing certain things, what do we keep in mind? So I would be interested in the report when it comes back. Any thoughts or comments you have on those that didn't make the list and ones that we might need to be mindful of as we're growing and looking at the city in future ways?
Was that a question or? Oh, a comment. Okay. I was waiting to hear the answer. I was getting excited about that. We might actually have something in Ward 1. Was there anything in Ward 1 on the 27 onward?
No, there's nothing there. That's why I was asking that's why I was making a comment of what is 28 to 37.
Okay, well, Mayor's house, that's there. Should be good for something. My question was on the online mapping tool. Good initiative. Didn't seem to give us what we really wanted, but great opportunity for taking such an innovative approach. Is there anything that we might do differently, or will we continue to use it in the next half as we move from draft to final report?
Mayor Jaworski, I think that's a good question and or good comment. I think my response regarding the intangible nature of the beginning of the study was one of the reasons why we didn't see the feedback that we had hoped for, because I thought it was a fantastic tool and I was really quite surprised that we didn't get the uptake that we had hoped for. It wouldn't take much to take that and insert it, I think, or at least create a link to it to allow people to use it now at this stage. And I agree that this shouldn't be the end of our attempts to be innovative in terms of reaching out to the community. I'm hopeful that maybe the next time we do it, we'll just have a community that's more responsive, or we'll be able to figure out what is it that really grabs people that we didn't quite get right this time around.
I do think, I knew we did one on drop bike locations, potential ones, and that's where people, you don't really have to think much of it. You just have to think, where do I work, where do I live, and they're going to drop a couple pins, and they used it. This is pretty esoteric, quite a thinking engagement, so perhaps that's it. Seeing no further questions, I look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Bodley, Councillor Freeman, all those in favor? All of us, thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to ask a question. Now that we've received this report, will it be posted now on the website under studies? Because it's very difficult if this report's buried into a council packet.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, my intent was tomorrow to release the report on the Engage Waterloo Region platform that we use for engaging with the public. However, I saw this morning a Record article that talked about how it was already up there. So I actually did post it. I posted it, or I had it posted, and it is there now on the Engage Waterloo Region platform.
Can it also be on our website, waterloo.ca, under Plan Studies and Strategies? No, all I see, Jeff, is the terms of reference. I want this study. Okay. There's a terms of reference and there's a landscape map.
I think we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm hearing from CFO, I'm hearing from Tony. Everybody wants it up there. That's good. We're all there. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Lindsay. Next up, item E, outdoor sports field strategy implementation, prepared by Jeff Silcox-Childs and Jim Bowman. No presentations, I do believe. No presentations. Questions for our team? Seeing no questions for our team on the outdoor field strategy. Look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Veith, Councillor Freeman with a comment. Go ahead.
So just for clarity, we're not planning to do anything with the diamonds in Waterloo Park for a little while. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, that is correct. So the last report that you would have seen about a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, from the Waterloo Park Advisory Committee identified their priorities for the coming years, and that is not on their priority list.
And just for further clarity, that's diamonds 1 and 2, but what about the student diamonds 3 and 4, the ones by the tennis club? Are we doing any improvements there? I knew we were considering improvements there. I can't remember if we actually are.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, there are some improvements being, I'm told, there are some improvements being planned there, being considered.
Okay, I thought so. Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All of us, 1 absent. Thank you. Good to see you again, John. Never get to see you much anymore. Item F, update on traffic and parking measures, Gatestone Boulevard, prepared by Mr. Jim Bowman, presentation by Mr. Jim Bowman, with much of moral support. No formal presentation.
No formal presentation.
Just informal commentary?
Just a bit of a recap. In April of 2018, Council received a report about the upgrades to the diamond at Laurelwood on Gatestone to play T-ball for the summer months of May, June, and July, part of July. And at that time, Council asked us to come back to evaluate how the success or how things went that season. And this evening, throughout that time, then we facilitated an evaluation with the ball groups, and we engaged 3 residents who live close by, who are here this evening, Mr. Aaron Bauer and Jim Weir, to help us to investigate the parking and the use of the diamond on that Gatestone property, Laurelwood Park. As a result, this report you have this evening gives you a sense of what direction we like to take in terms of the parking and the traffic calming that would enable us to continue to play baseball, T-ball, for the 2019 season. So this report is really a follow-up from 2018.
Okay, thank you. Questions for staff? Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. 2 questions and then a comment if I can. So the first question is there's a little bit of this in the report, but I want to make sure that we reinforce it, I guess, is that we're going to continue to work with Waterloo Minor Baseball to encourage the T-ball players to be parking at the school. Yeah, they're probably not driving. Probably not. The parents of the T-ball players to thank you, Mayor Jaworski, to park at the Laurelwood Public School.
Through you to Mayor Jaworski and Chair. That is very correct. We are working with Waterloo Minor Baseball. We'll continue to use this site as a T-ball site, which is for 6 or 7-year-old children, and encourage their parents to park at the school. And we've already made arrangements with the school for the coming season to move forward.
And maybe, sorry, through you, Mayor Jaworski, maybe if you could just speak to what that communication effort looks like with Waterloo Minor Baseball, how that's being communicated from the league to the parents.
Yes. Our staff meet with the executive of Waterloo Minor Ball. We present with them a letter to all the coaches who distribute letters to all the parents as well who are driving and guests who may attend those particular games, i.e. grandparents and so forth. And so that has been our practice, and we'll continue to do that once once we get approval for this evening, with council's direction, to encourage them and to make them aware of the fact that there is no, there's a stop-off zone and a no parking area as outlined.
Thank you. Second question through Mayor Jaworski is with respect to the traffic calming implementation. So just a comment about the exact specific location of where the traffic calming is being recommended, particularly based on resident commentary to me around that location, and making sure that it's not in the turning radius of them backing out of their driveway. If we can be very cognizant of that when we're placing the temporary traffic calming measures this year, I would appreciate that, or any commentary you have on that would be appreciated.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. We will, and we always do, take into consideration the driveways or other roadways when we're installing the seasonal traffic calming signs. Sometimes, based on where the driveways are, it is difficult to get them in, but we will do our best. I understand the one location was a little close to one of the driveways, so we've noted that, and we'll make a change for this year.
Very appreciated, and perhaps if I definitely recognize that there's spacing issues and it's impossible to make it exactly work for everybody, but you know, maybe if we're slightly moving it closer to one resident and then back towards the other resident, so it's not the same resident who's having to take the brunt of this every year, it would be great. And the last comment that I just have is I just want to reinforce, this is a staff report that is being put forward for staff recommendation for us, but this was really a community-minded, sort of community-engaged piece here, and would really appreciate and like to encourage council here to vote in favor of accepting this recommendation, because it wasn't just staff going out there and it wasn't just me going out there. There were definitely members of the community who were involved in coming forward to determine a solution to the problem. And so I would just put that out there to my colleagues. I'd love to move the motion. Yes, thank you.
We'll have to scout for a seconder. Scout for a seconder. Oh, your teammate, Councillor Freeman. Well, high five. We'll call you the West Side Council. Yeah. Any other questions, commentary? Seeing none, all those in favor? All here, all for it, one absent. Thank you. Item G, Culture Plan Implementation Report Card 2018, prepared by Aaron Appleby and presentation by Aaron. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and members of Council, for the opportunity to present highlights from the 2018 Culture Plan, which the report card you're all receiving right now. The Arts and Culture section of Economic Development has been reporting and collecting this data since 2015 in the form of this report card as a strategy to report to the community about the Culture Plan. You will note some adjustments to the benchmarks reported for 2018. These changes reflect the changing work plan priorities of staff and collaborative initiatives with the community. Goal 1 is to uncover and build community capacity for creativity, expression, and cultural engagement. This is done by investing in culture and nurturing capacity for authentic cultural expression. You will notice that although the number of capacity building opportunities offered was the same in both years, attendance increased significantly in 2018. In 2017, in response to community needs, capacity building workshops focused on specialized topics and targeted specific audiences. In 2018, these opportunities included several large-scale events that targeted a broader audience. Our artist roster, a way in which we offer information about paid opportunities for artists in Waterloo, has grown in size. 24 additional artists signed up to be a part of this database. This audience receives timely information about professional development and calls for proposals. We also introduced a new festival last year, Lumen, which provided opportunities for creative expression. Waterloo employed 63 artists for Lumen, and it brought an estimated 10,000 people to Uptown Waterloo. One of the capacity building events I mentioned is Amplify. Since 2016, the City of Waterloo has hosted Amplify, our annual culture summit. Each and every year, the community has participated and gathered to hear inspiring stories of creativity, collaboration, placemaking, and innovation. Many of these stories have come from artists, administrators, and creative entrepreneurs working in the community. Goal 2 focuses on strengthening the community's cultural heritage by uniting Waterloo's past and its present. Highlights for the museum and built heritage strategies are led and reported on by other divisions in the city. Waterloo's historical narrative, artifact collection, and built heritage help to tell the story of local roots and how they have shaped the city. In 2018, in collaboration with Heritage Working Group, the 21st Annual Heritage Day Workshop was hosted at Wilfrid Laurier University. The theme was Heritage Makes Sense and looked at the positive financial and economic impact of heritage in cities. 2018 saw projects like a historic cemetery tour of Mount Hope and a pop-up museum which traveled to 11 events throughout the city. 2018 also saw the creation of temporary Heritage House signs for the Mary Allen neighborhood. These signs provided information about construction date and the names of early residents, creating a more concrete connection to the past. These milestones help to contribute to the appreciation of heritage and its contribution to the community. Goal 3 focuses on enlivening streets, neighborhoods, and public green spaces. It provides opportunities for people to gather together in public spaces and to participate in shared experiences. Waterloo Public Square bookings increased in 2018. The low number in 2017 was attributed to the impact of construction. The rebound in 2018 suggests that organizations are once again viewing the square as a desirable location for events. It should be noted that this number only captures formal bookings of the square rather than all animation that happens in the space. Our events in the square are captured under cultural festivals on city property. This number also does not include cultural events that naturally happen in the public space, for example, the Corgi Meetup. In previous years, we have reported on the number of events and programs at the Visitor and Heritage Information Center. Moving forward, we will focus on attendance. Attendance at the center shows us how many people are actively using the space and provides a better gauge for the benefits and importance of the center than solely the number of programs being offered. In 2018, we worked to animate laneways, parks, green spaces, and other public spaces in addition to the 2 spaces that we operate. Goal 4 is to enhance engagement of community diversity to build a stronger shared sense of belonging. In 2018, our Artist in Resident program, featuring Governor General Award-winning artist St. Marie Walker, engaged people in the park through a variety of open-air workshops, walks, and temporary installations that provoke prose in the park. Their focus was to guide audience engagement and get people to think about the past, present, and future of the park. They investigated topics like environmental landscape, environmental care and concern, healthy embodiment, play, and what it means to be part of a flexible, ever-changing shared space. Participants had the opportunity to both reflect and share their perspective on the park. Another initiative included National Indigenous Peoples Day. Luke Swinson and his father created this piece of temporary public art. In 2018, the Arts and Culture team collaborated with community partners and artists to successfully run Lumen, a festival celebrating light-based art and technology-based installations. During Lumen, the streets of Uptown Waterloo were brought alive with 17 temporary public art installations showcasing light-based new media and media art. This one event caused a large jump in the number of temporary public art installations and created opportunities for artists to showcase their work and the audience to engage. Goal 5 is to expand community awareness and appreciation of culture. Social media continues to be a tool to reach a broad audience, and in 2018, the Arts and Culture team experimented with Snapchat and geofilters, which received 20% usage, reaching a different demographic. The social media engagement total decreased slightly in 2018, although the number of posts decreased due to staffing changes, the number of engagements per post increased. Create Waterloo continues to regularly send an e-blast about cultural events happening in Waterloo and keeps our growing audience informed. Our followers have grown by 12% in 2018. Goal 6 is to foster collaboration in the culture sector. The city is taking strides to strengthen relationships with other municipalities, all levels of government, education, key cultural organizations, community associations, and local businesses. Arts and culture staff continue to search for opportunities for relationships between organizations not in the culture sector, and that can be seen in a major increase of collaborative partners in 2018. These partnerships will continue to grow into 2019. Moving forward into 2019, the City of Waterloo will continue to act as a catalyst for culture. We will remain true to our past, building on present strengths and making the most of opportunities. If you don't follow us already on social media, please do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. Thanks for the great presentation, and also encourage everybody to sign up for the newsletter. Every time I get the newsletter, I see what's happening in the coming month. It's just astounding. So great list of things there. Questions from council? Councilor Budley.
Just had a quick one through you, Mayor Jaworski, and not really a question, just a comment. One of the things learning about the Lumen Festival when the team came to ECDEV to talk about the Lumen Festival, one of my big takeaways was during the campaign, a lot of artists were talking about how do we get money directly into the hands of the artists. And through the Lumen Festival, we encouraged businesses to donate or sponsor, and that money went directly to the artists, which I think is great. And I think finding more creative ways like that for us to get money into the hands of the artists is a really great idea, and I would encourage us to continue to do that.
And seeing no further, I have a comment for Estero on citizen satisfaction. Certainly in our latest survey, arts and culture did really, really well. And I really think it's a testament to the modest investments we've been able to make and stretch it so that it looks like so much is going on that people are very pleased. But I think at this council table and yourself, there's a lot more work to do. So I'm just wondering how you might correlate citizen satisfaction and enthusiasm for arts and culture, yet there's a lot more work to do.
I think there's always more work that we can do. Part of what we are relying on very heavily is increased engagement, with our community cultural organizations, so that we can better support those organizations to increase the number of activities that are happening in Waterloo. I think some of that citizen appreciation may also be due to the fact that we are doing a better and better job communicating all of the amazing things that are happening, because there is already a lot of stuff, not just stuff that we're delivering, but also that the community is providing. But part of our job is continuing to get the message out about all of those opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Vasic wants to second it. All those in favor? That's it. Thank you. Great, great document, great presentation, very thorough. Thank you very much, Aaron. Woo, we're getting there. An informal public meeting. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 9A, Z1901, general amendments to zoning bylaw number 2018-050. There will no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application. A staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands, which I guess doesn't really apply, or anyone who signs the registry will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anyone who wants notice of this application, including formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk at the rear of council chambers. The planner, Dominic Simpson, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Dominic.
Welcome. Thank you. Forgive me, it's my first time up here, so.
Hey, for some of us, it's we're fairly new to here too, so that's good.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. My name is Dominic Simpson. I'm a planner with planning approvals here at the city, and just going to give a brief overview of general amendments to the city's new zoning bylaw, and this will be a citywide zoning bylaw amendment. So just as some background, the city's new zoning bylaw was approved by council on September 10th in 2018. This bylaw has since been appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, but since the bylaw was approved, staff have had a good opportunity to work with the bylaw in approving applications, and we've had the opportunity to see where the bylaw works and where it works well, and where there might be areas for improvement. So with that, we're initiating general amendments to zoning bylaw 2018-050 with the objective to correct, update, and or add provisions that might not have been reflected when it was first approved in September. Some of the key items that are being considered are clarification and interpretation of existing regulations. For example, clarifying some definitions or carrying over regulations that were addressed in old bylaws but might have been missed in the new bylaw. Another key component would be general errors and corrections, just like typos or grammatical errors that we found while working with the bylaw. Another key component would be cannabis regulations. So when this bylaw was first approved in September, the regulations reflected that of the Wynne government, that the dispensaries were to be operated by the province. So with this amendment, we'll be reflecting the changes under the Ford government with the private retailers. Another key component was home childcare regulations. So we currently have home childcare regulations in the bylaw, but we were asked by the region to refresh and take a review of those regulations so that they more so align with the regional provisions and the provincial provisions. And lastly, another key component we'll be considering is rooftop patio regulations. This item was brought to our attention by several members in the community that were concerned with rooftop patios abutting low-rise residential neighborhoods, concerns around noise and their proximity to these neighborhoods. So we'll definitely be considering that in this amendment process, looking at best practice solutions and seeing what other municipalities have with regards to regulating rooftop patios. In terms of next steps, we'll be circulating these amendments with internal staff and other review agencies, as well as we'll be posting a consolidated list of all these amendments online for agencies to review and also for the public to have a chance to give their feedback if there's items that maybe we missed and they would like to have addressed in this amendment. And then following that, we would consider any comments and feedback and bring a report to council at a formal public meeting in the next few months. And that's about it for me. I'll open the floor to any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dominic. Questions for the... Oh, hold on. Does any councillor have any questions for staff? Please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification may be asked. Council members should not express opinions at this point. So if you have any opinions on typos, keep them to yourself. Nah, any questions? If not, I have one. On the, since these are general amendments, I'll ask Joel to listen in on this. We're not looking for people to bring back their list of baggage that they had from the 3-year consultation. How will we differentiate and keep people on track? We're looking for general amendments.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Response to that question, I think it's really an application that's initiated by the city. So the purview or the nature, the scope of the application is really within our control. We are looking to primarily deal with some of the administrative components, the correctives and the clarifications, as Dominic indicated, that we've come across in the first 6 months of applying this bylaw through our building permit reviews and whatnot. And again, that's an objective of more just minor administration, if you will. There's a few topics like the cannabis retailing that's to align with legislation. Unfortunately, the region submitted comments on the home child cares the day after we received, or council actually approved the bylaw, so they missed her by 1 day. So we'll certainly work to improve our regulations. There's a strong intent to advance daycares within the community. So, we'll continue to advance our regulations to make that zoning framework as clear as possible and as open as possible for daycares within the community. And the rooftop patio has been an issue that has been brought forward again. We did deal with patios at a grade level in proximity to low-rise residential neighborhoods. We did not contemplate at the time rooftop patios in proximity to low-rise residential neighborhoods, and the community's asked us to look at that. So we think that's a fair request, and we'll do that through this process.
Great clarification. That's within our control. It's not a free-for-all. No, so wonderful. Further questions of staff? Councillor Henry?
Just in terms of the process that you've described, Dominic, on the screen, late spring 2019. So I guess the rush will be: do we get a formal public meeting, or is LRT up and running? Since those are the same target in a general sense, but that's a fairly compressed timeline to bring this back. So I'm wondering how quickly number 1 will happen, so that people are able to do number 2, and then you can consider those and write number 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry, a good amount of the work has been done internally. So within the next couple weeks, I'm going to want to talk with internal staff a bit more before sending out the formal circulation, but hoping to do that in the next couple weeks, and then give another few weeks for other agencies to get back with their feedback, and then the late spring. I know it's vague, just like ION. I think it's a achievable timeline.
Okay, that's helpful, and council would be included on circulation of when you post the information for the public, so we can see it. And I just flag on the home child care pieces. I know staff are likely aware to respond to the region's comments that came on apparently September 11th, but Bill 66 is proceeding through the legislature as well. That may have some impacts on size and other things. I don't know what's in our regulations, and the region's made comments there. So since that's a legislation in progress, I know we don't want to do amendments to amendments on the same topic. So I'm seeing Joel's interested in commenting on that.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry on that specific point, without prejudicing where we actually get to with our staff recommendations, what I would suggest is that the amendments were likely going to be a simplification of the child care regulations to say that the child cares must align with applicable legislation, versus us trying to interpret the legislation of the day, which is constantly changing, and there are special rules too, which I think the region's comments, our review actually reflected the legislation in effect. We just didn't get into some of the special regulations that the region applies, and the zoning bylaw was causing them concern in that regard. So we'll simplify it and simply likely just cross-reference back to applicable law.
Last call for council questions. Seeing none. There are no registered delegations. Is there anyone else present here tonight who wishes to speak to this application? Phil, Glenn, Kate, Jim? Seeing none. If there are no more delegations, this informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Thank you, Dominic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving forward, next on our agenda is regional information and correspondence, items A and B, and then a critical item, item C. I'll look for our traditional, more vintage councillors to give me permission to give the region permission to larvicide the place. Specific places. Councillor Henry wants to larvicide the place. Specific places. Anyone else? Councillor Bonagor, she's keen on it too. All those in favor? Congratulations to us for preventing, was it, not Lyme disease? West Nile, thank you. There you go. There you go. Under new business, I'll check with council later, but we have an all-council meeting that we acknowledge that we're going to participate in the all-council meeting. Somebody want to move that? Councillor Hanmer, Councillor Bodley, all those in favor? It's all of us. Any new business from council members? Councillor Veith.
It's not really business. I just want to congratulate the Waterloo Siskins on their win. Sorry?
The Cherry Cup schedule just came out.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the first game, they're playing for the Cherry Cup again in Listowel Friday night at 7:30, and then I think Sunday back here. So, and apparently there's a bus if you want to take the bus out to Listowel to see the game Friday night, and apparently it's lots of fun, yeah.
Bus to Listowel, really?
Yeah. Yeah, because you can probably have some beverages of choice on the bus. But anyway, I just want to congratulate the Siskins and all the volunteers and the managers. It's pretty exciting for them.
Yes,
Thanks.
excellent. Further items of note. Enactment of some bylaws. Councillor Veith wants to. Councillor Hanmer wants to. It's actually just one bylaw, so it's just not a whole bunch or anything. All those in favor? It's all of us. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Bodley, Councillor Freeman, all of us in favor. Thank you.